Good morning, Walnut Creek. I am excited to be talking to you today about The Outsiders. You just finished reading chapter 5, so we're going to take some time to review this chapter because it's pretty important. There are some other things that we need to do as well. One item that we have on our agenda is talking about some of the literary terms that are utilized in this particular chapter. And most importantly, we need to take time to talk about the poem that's included in this particular section. So we are going to analyze Robert Frost's poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay. First, let's take a moment to look at some of the review questions. I would like you to think about the answers just to remind yourself what has happened thus far. What two characters are hiding in a church? Why did they flee? In other words, why did they go to the church? How do they pass their time while staying in the church? And finally, who is the new spy for the Greasers? If you answered Pony Boy and Johnny for the first question, you are absolutely right. For the next question, why did they flee? Obviously, they got into some trouble with the Socs, and so they decided to leave town because the law would be after them since Johnny killed the Soc. The third question, how did they pass their time? Mostly they spend the time reading a novel called Gone with the Wind. That particular novel is also an illusion that the author utilizes to represent the type of people that Johnny looks up to. And finally, who's the new spy for the Greasers? Well, Dally told Johnny and Ponyboy that Cherry is actually giving them information, which is surprising to the boys. Let's take a moment to view a segment of the movie, The Outsiders. This particular segment is going to have Ponyboy reciting the poem Nothing Gold Can Stay to Johnny. This particular poem was written by Robert Frost. Robert Frost is particularly known for his poems about nature. So let's listen to this, and afterwards we'll take some time to discuss it.
One morning I woke up earlier than usual. The church was colder than ever.
Golly, that was sure pretty, huh?
Yeah,
It's like the mist is what's pretty, you know? All gold and silver. Too bad it can't stay like that all the time.
nothing gold can stay.
Huh?
Nature's first green is gold. Her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sang to grief. So dawn goes down today. Nothing gold can stay.
Where'd you learn that? That's what I meant.
Robert Frost wrote it. I always remembered it because I never quite knew what he meant by it.
Well, I never noticed colors and clouds and stuff till you kept reminding me about it. Kind of like they were never there before.
Yeah. I don't think I could ever tell Steve or Two-Bit, or even Derry about the clouds and sunset. Just you and Soda Pop. Maybe Cherry Valance.
Guess we're different, huh?
Shoot, yeah. Maybe they,
Maybe you're right.
So this poem was intentionally selected by our author, S.E. Hinton, because of its overall meaning. When an author opts to use a well-known piece of writing or artwork or an event or even a person as a reference, that's because they are really trying to emphasize an idea. So it's our job as the reader to figure out how this particular poem applies to the story The Outsiders. So let's take a moment to analyze this particular piece.
Even though Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost is only 8 lines long and seems simple, several readings of the poem can help unearth its deeper meaning. Here is the full text of the poem for your reference. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. In this poem, Frost explains that nothing, especially that which is perfect and beautiful, can last forever. He gives several examples of this. The first green of spring is her hardest hue to hold, so Eden sank to grief, and so dawn goes down to day. These are all different ways of saying the same thing: nothing good can last. Frost uses nature as the main symbol for his theme because the cycle of life and death shown through the 4 seasons provides imagery that many people can identify with. And in this poem, nature symbolizes the idea that all the good and beautiful things in life will eventually fade away. One of the most important messages to take from this poem is that once you recognize how fleeting and precious certain moments are, you will appreciate them even more.
Spring is finally starting to arrive in Erie County, and if you take a walk outside, you might notice that nature is starting to bloom. And when you look at its first leaf, as Robert Frost has described, you'll notice that you don't really see a green hue or green color. You do actually see more of a gold. So we get an understanding of what he was trying to describe to us. In addition, you can see that we don't really see any leaves yet. The first thing that we noticed are flowers, are blossoms. So we truly are starting to see the signs of spring and the very beginning of his idea.
So let's read this poem together, and let's read it as if we were doing a read aloud, where we read it and think about it simultaneously. So here we go. Nothing gold can stay. Nature's first green is gold. My first thoughts are on the word first because it tells me it's the beginning or the start of something. When I think of the word green, I know that it also is a symbol for something new. And I know that gold can also be a symbol as well because it tends to represent something that is precious or valuable. So when I think about nature's first green being described as gold or something precious or valuable, I tend to think about spring because spring is a time when we finally get to see some of the first green of the year. If I go to the next line, her hardest hue to hold. Hue means color, so that tells me that green is not going to last, that it's more or less temporary. Her early leaves a flower. So I know that flowers typically represent a beginning or a start, and it's something that, once again, we find very beautiful or we tend to appreciate. So before it can turn into that leaf, it begins as a bud or a flower, but only so an hour. This particular line seems to go along with the second line, her hardest hue to hold. So I don't think that we mean an hour literally. To me, it is something that has a figurative meaning. So it's telling me that it's only temporary. If we go to the last 4 lines of the poem, we see then leaf subsides to leaf. So I wonder what the word subsides mean. And so I think in this case, it basically means to give way. And then I go to the next line. So Eden sank to grief. Well, I know Eden was a paradise, and if you think about the biblical story, and there's a picture in the upper left-hand corner, this is where Adam and Eve basically were tempted to eat from the tree of knowledge, and basically when they did that, everything changed. They lost their innocence, and the paradise that they knew was gone. So this is telling me that not everything lasts. So dawn goes down today. Well, we also know that dawn and the progress of the sun represents a cycle. And once again, dawn would be the beginning. It's ever so brief, and eventually it ends as well. So when we get to the last line, nothing gold can stay, it's really telling us that things that are beautiful are only temporary, and we need to appreciate what we have when we have them. And I also think about how if we didn't have those moments are beautiful and they were always beautiful, we probably wouldn't learn to value them quite as much. Let's use some of the literary terms that we have talked about this year to analyze the poem. Finally, let's take a moment to talk about poetic devices. Poetic devices typically refer to sound. So we have two that we're going to explore, alliteration and rhyme scheme. Take a moment to read this slide. Now, let's look at the poem once again, Nothing Gold Can Stay. The very first poetic device that we were talking about or referencing was alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the initial consonant sound in words that are close together. So in the very first line, we have green and gold. In the second line, we have her, hardest, hue, and hold. Let's see if you can find an additional example of alliteration. Finally, let's look at the rhyme scheme. When we're talking about rhyme scheme, we are looking at the very end of the lines. So when I look at the very last word, I see gold and hold. These two rhyme. So I would mark those as A. When I look at the third line, flower, it doesn't rhyme with either gold or hold, so I know that we would put a B at the end of flower. When I look at the fourth line, our does rhyme with flower, so I now have A, B, B. I then go on to leaf. This concludes our discussion of the poem by Robert Frost. I hope that you found it useful and insightful. I hope that you are able to identify why this particular poem is an illusion, and more importantly, I hope that you understand how it relates to the overall theme of The Outsiders. Thank you so much for your time. Stay gold, Walnut Creek. Stay gold.